Hello, gorgeous goddesses. Welcome to this video on the Cancer new moon and the solstice. This Cancerian season is extra magical. I'm going to share why as we go throughout this video today. You can really see a lot of expansion happening in projects you've been working on or anything where you have poured a lot of effort, intention, or focus. And Cancer is a cardinal sign, so it really does like to create, but it brings in such a special way of creating. It's not about the masculine approach of how hard do we work, how many hours do we put into a project, but it's really about this feminine understanding of creation and the ability that we hold to birth new things into the world, to take things from just an idea or a concept and actually see it come to life. And it really places a spotlight on our capacity to receive and the frequency and energy that is actually behind the creation, behind the intention. So, we're going to dive into all of this today. Some really exciting things happening in the cosmos that we get to co create with. So, I want to take a moment before we dive into all of that because I have a really exciting announcement. So, I hinted at this in my last video, and since it has come to fruition, it's been something that I've been birthing into the world. So, I recently launched a new podcast called Born for the Stars. You may be listening to this video, this audio now through the podcast. So, it's available on Apple and Spotify. And in addition to the cosmic updates and guidance around the new and full moon and major cosmic transits, I'm also going to be focused in that space on the Akashic records. That was my first episode, was all about more fully understanding the Akashic records and how powerful it is in guiding you to your soul purpose, your highest path for abundance. And in one of those first three podcast episodes, I also take an excerpt from one of my paid digital courses, Call in Your Millionaire Consciousness in the Akashic Records, and I guide you into the Akashic Records. So it doesn't have to be just this abstract concept. You can actually enter that space and begin to experience the records. So definitely go check that out. Subscribe if you haven't already. And for this specific video, I am going to be pulling up the chart today and pointing out some things that you can even look for in your unique birth chart. So you may actually want to watch this one on video. So if you are listening on the podcast, I'll link the video below if it's helpful for you to have that visual guide as you learn to explore your birth chart and your unique astrology a little bit more. So, with that being said, let's dive in and take a look at this Cancer new moon. I'm going to share my screen here and let's dive into the astrology. So, we have the sun, the moon, and Jupiter in the sign of Cancer. The moon, this new moon energy is at 4 degrees. New moons mark a new beginning, a new cycle, which is why they're so good for setting intentions and really doing like a check in with yourself, especially with this Cancerian energy around how you are feeling. It really brings us inward, like what's happening internally will eventually be reflected externally in our world. So when we're able to do that inner work of having an awareness of the emotions we are experiencing and our thoughts and just like the energy and frequency we are in, and we're able to do that work of shifting internally, that is eventually reflected in our external world every single time. And sometimes we approach this backwards where we try to change things by just working on the external instead of recognizing the root of it, which always comes from within. And Cancer really reminds us that. It's the opposite of the Capricorn energy. They're opposing signs. So it really is this beautiful reminder that all of our creations, what we manifest in the world, what we create, what we experience in the world, begins within, always begins within, with what we believe is possible and our own energetic state. So, Cancer is a water sign, a cardinal water sign, and it's very connected to emotions. So, during Cancer season, we can find that emotions are heightened. And I often talk about this in my videos that We want to be aware of our emotions. If we break the word emotion down, it's really energy in motion. And emotions are actually meant to flow. We're never meant to stay stuck or stagnant in any one feeling for too long. And if that happens, it's simply because we've attached a story to what we are experiencing. And then that story keeps us caught in this loop. But if we actually are just being with our emotions, which is a practice and skill in and of itself, just to simply experience emotions as energy in our body, curious about where we're holding that energy, we'll find that it naturally moves. It naturally flows. It's not meant to stay stuck or stagnant, hence the water element of Cancer as well. It's meant to flow. We're meant to go with the flow. It's an extremely intuitive sign. So Cancer season, we're very connected to our intuition, and we're very much reminded that intuition is our best guidance system in life. It transcends the logic of the mind, it's connected to the wisdom of our soul. And the more that we learn to trust our intuition, to distinguish it from our fear response, intuition, it really has nothing to do with fear. I know that's a very common question. And this is something I'm going to dive more into in my podcast as well. I've been doing different polls on Instagram and Facebook, and a lot of people are interested in intuitive development. So, our intuition is very different than our fear programming. And many people want to know, how do I discern between intuition and fear? And of course, we're not going to dive into that in its entirety today because that is a whole thing and a whole practice. But what I will say today is they're very different things. Our intuition is not fear. Our intuition is that wisdom that's coming from our soul, our higher self. It is divine guidance. So we can fully trust our intuition every single time. There's never a moment where we can't, especially when we learn to distinguish it from fear programming and fear responses. So, the shadow lower octave expression of Cancer, and if you're wondering where this is in your chart before we go into that, look for the Cancer symbol. It is symbolized by the crab. And the new moon here is falling at 4 degrees. So it's going to be pretty soon. Like if you locate where the Cancer symbol is, if you look at like the house placement, the number that corresponds to it, especially at the very early degrees, so the 4 degree mark. So I use the Placidus system. So it's not uncommon for zodiac signs to fall in more than one house placement. So that's where knowing the degree is really key. So you're looking for the Cancer symbol and that very early degree, the 4 degrees, and then the house placement is in to see where these Cancerian qualities fall in your chart. That's a beautiful thing with astrology. We don't always recognize when we're first just learning astrology that each of the 12 zodiac signs are different archetypal energies that we each have within us. Some of them are more expressed. So if you have more planets in a certain sign, that energy and that archetype is going to be a bigger, more prominent part of your journey. But we have each of these energies within our chart somewhere. And the house that it rules over is where we're most likely to see those traits expressed. So that's just a little side note if you want to check out where this new moon is falling for you. And the bigger picture here, and I hinted at this at the start of the video, what's making this Cancer season extra magical is Jupiter. Jupiter recently moved into the sign of Cancer where it is exalted. So when a planet is in its exaltation, it's at its most potent, it's at its most powerful. And this new moon is conjuncting Jupiter. They're just 1 degree apart. So it's playing a huge role in the expression of this new moon. And this is actually going to be a longer cycle for you. So Jupiter stays in each sign for about a year. So you definitely want to locate where Cancer is falling in your chart because this is an area where you're going to experience expansion, good fortune, and abundance. And it can also be an amplification of what isn't working when Jupiter is in the equation because it amplifies everything it touches. So if there's an area of your life that isn't quite going as you would like, especially as it pertains to where Jupiter is falling in your chart, it's going to make that bigger. But it really is a blessing because once we are aware of something, we can create change around it. If you've been on this journey with me a while, probably every few videos I quote this by Carl Jung. It's an amazing quote, though. Until we make the unconscious conscious, it'll direct our life and we will call it fate. So when we become aware of something, we can no longer be ignorant to it. It is then our role to say, I'm going to create change. So Jupiter here is directly impacting this energy of the new moon, and it brings this element of optimism and expansion. So, this is what I was talking about, where you can really see projects expand at this time. You can have this deep sense of optimism and growth and adventure. It's a very beneficial aspect that Jupiter conjunct the sun. I mean, we just feel more confident in ourselves, we feel more self assured, we really feel hopeful in the path forward. And Jupiter really adds that to the equation. It's that optimism. Regardless of what happened in your past, each moment is a new beginning, and having that hope for the future is huge. And that's not something we just sit around and wait for, like, oh, I hope I'm hopeful tomorrow. No, we actively cultivate that. We learn to see things through a lens that promotes solutions and possibilities and the ability to move things forward, to always get unstuck, to always see that there is hope. That hopefulness is very key, right? If we can get to a space of hope in our life, we will take actions that allow for things to change. And then from there, we can move on from just feeling hopeful to experience feelings of joy and gratitude and excitement and even love. But I find that energy of hope is a really good turning point for us to lean into. Okay, going back to what I was saying about the shadow aspect. So every zodiac sign here has a lower and higher octave expression, and it's helpful to know both. So we can notice if we are falling into the shadow side of the expression of a sign and how we can move toward full self-expression. So with the sign of Cancer, in the shadow aspects, if we think of the crab, it can be too closed off. It can put those walls up for safety. So the crab has that tough outer shell. It's like the wall of protection, but then a soft underbelly. So being aware of where we may be putting those walls of protection up and how it's actually safer to really just keep an open heart. Having an open heart actually protects us more than being closed off. And if we think about it, of course it does, because an open heart is this energy of love and being in flow with the universe instead of closed off to blessings. I mean, love is such a high frequency. Love and truth, our inner truth. We're actually safer with an open heart than we are closed off. The other shadow expression of the Cancerian energy that could come up this new moon is we get overwhelmed with emotion. We allow our emotion to take over. Remember, emotions come and go. We don't want to be making big decisions in our life based on how we feel in any given moment. That's when we tend to have regrets, when we act out of emotion. Or we act out of fear as opposed to trusting our intuition, zooming out and seeing the larger picture. So some really fun aspects at play here. The moon is directly sextile Mars in the sign of Virgo. Mars is our drive, it's our life force energy. In the sign of Virgo, it's very work oriented, service oriented, and a sextile in astrology is a point of opportunity in a chart. So we can really take action on our big dreams during this season. But again, like with the Cancerian energy, it's not about working harder, putting in more hours just for the sake of it. And I'm not saying there's not an element of work that's required to bring things to life, but the question becomes, what actually moves the needle forward? And am I relying just on my strength alone? If I push harder, if I put more hours in, expecting that to have a turnaround when that's not necessarily the case. This really brings awareness to, with Mars in Virgo, working smarter, not harder, knowing what moves the needle forward, being very focused and persistent, dedicated, devotion. That's another word I would use to describe this aspect of Mars sextiling the moon and Jupiter is devotion. When we are devoted to something, we naturally pour into it. And when we pour into something in our life from a space of optimism and vision, it grows. every single time. It can't not. It's just the way the universe works. What we pour our energy, our attention into, again, from a space of hopefulness, optimism, a bigger vision, we're going to see it expand. So this energy is really beautiful here. And yeah, just that awareness of our frequency and our energy, our cyclical natures very much come into the spotlight with Cancer. It's ruled by the moon, honoring the different cycles and seasons of our life and not resisting that. Now, the other aspect here is we see a square happening with Neptune and Saturn, squaring the moon and squaring Jupiter. So I spoke about this in my last video as well when it comes to the square between Saturn and Jupiter, and how this could really bring in an element of resistance when it comes to our vision, but it's the kind of resistance that's like strengthening us. I'll always say to my private clients, it's like who you become in the process is allowing you to hold the vision. So we often get molded and shaped by what could be perceived as challenges, but it's calling us to rise up. Anytime Saturn comes into the mix, there is an element of maturity, needing to step up, needing to put focus into an area in order to see it blossom and bloom. But Saturn wants to mold us into somebody who knows our power to create and has a really, really solid foundation. If we have a rocky foundation, our creations won't be sustainable, whether that's in your business. If the solid foundation isn't there, you are going to experience, more up and down cash months, or sometimes things work, sometimes they don't, or your emotions are influenced by the success of your business, the money you're making in any given month, right? All of those are like a rocky foundation. We need a really solid foundation in order to allow things to grow. And this aspect supports us in creating that. And again, there could be an element, it is a square with Saturn, of we feel very optimistic about the future. We're in this energy of expansion, and there may be opportunities. Let's phrase it this way: there's opportunities to rise to the occasion. Do we really want it? If we really want something, we're not going to let, a few setbacks stop us. We're going to use that as fuel. Now, Neptune here brings a very different vibe to it all. Neptune is about transcendence, our higher self. I really like this energy here. I always, like this energy of like Neptune and Jupiter flowing together. Again, this is a square formation, so there's a little bit of tension here, but overall, this can help us stay focused on where we are really going and what really matters to us, especially with the Cancerian energy. It's not success for success sake. It's not achievement for the sake of achievement. It's really about coming back to your inner truth. What really matters to you at the end of the day? And when we create from that space of being rooted and connected to our inner truth, that's where we have like endless energy and devotion. And I'm not saying that in the sense of there's not days where we're tired, or I never want to give this idea of perfection when we're going for our dreams. Or I was having this conversation in my group chat for my iconic lightworker mastermind. We were talking about how it doesn't mean we're not aligned with our soul path. If there's obstacles or challenges, often our soul path will stretch us to grow and expand. And we really see that in astrology as well when it comes to the nodal placements and the north node in your chart, and how that doesn't necessarily come easy, but the north node is what your soul is learning. It's what it's evolving into. Anytime we are evolving into something, there's an element of discomfort until we calibrate, until we create a new standard, a new identity, a new self-image. It's that recalibration, and that discomfort just means we're letting go of the old and we're leaping into the new. We're expanding into something new, and that discomfort doesn't mean that something has gone wrong. What if we reframe that and we start to see that as part of the creation process? And then this conversation here around the Cancerian energy is how we nourish ourselves during that process, right? The tools we have to relax our nervous system, to really not only give to those around us. Cancer energy is very giving, very loving, very caring, very motherly. And it's also about how we direct that energy toward ourselves, how we're nourishing and caring for ourselves. So this aspect here is quite interesting, and we can certainly work with it to create growth and expansion that is very sustainable. Sustainable growth with Saturn. I would lean into it that way, and not only sustainable growth, but growth that is actually very meaningful. There is another aspect I want to mention here because it's pretty much exact and I think very powerful. So, Mercury is at the final degrees of Cancer, 28 degrees. And it's forming a really beautiful aspect with Uranus here at the 29-degree mark of Taurus. And I just love this. So even though it's not directly interacting with this new moon, it's happening at the time of the new moon. And, we'll feel it days leading up to the new moon and after, a little bit after as well, until Mercury moves into Leo. But it's this beautiful energy of expanding what's possible for us, awakening to new possibilities, not allowing our mind to limit us. So I did a reel on this a month ago, maybe about a month ago, how when we don't know the how, that means we're about to quantum leap. So often we freak out if we don't know the how, but it's our mind that's freaking out because our mind thinks in order for me to achieve this, I need to know how it's done. And that's a very practical, logical thing. But we don't play in practical and logical here. We play in the magical. We are connected to our higher self. We're here to be the outliers, to defy the odds. I don't want logical linear results personally. I feel if you're here, you don't either. You want an amazing life. You want to be fully connected to your creative power. You're not interested. And I don't mean this to say there's not a place for logic. I just mean, hey, when I'm creating, I want creations that feel miraculous. I want a larger force to move through me. I don't want to be limited by my mind and what my mind knows to be possible. Because just because our mind doesn't know how to do something doesn't mean it's not possible. It just means our mind doesn't know how to do it. And that's when we get to lean into a greater force. We get to figure it out as we move forward and co-create with infinite intelligence. And there's something so beautiful about being in co-creation with infinite intelligence instead of limited by our mind. If our mind knows how, then we're just repeating. We're not going to experience the same incredible growth or the feeling of like magic and miracles, or we know how because we've done it in the past. So that's where we get in these cycles where ultimately we're just recreating basically the same thing again and again when we're actually here to grow and evolve and have our creations grow and evolve as well. All right, so that is our new moon in Cancer. Let me know how this landed for you below, how this resonated with you, what you are manifesting in this new moon energy. And yeah, I'm going to attach some helpful links for you below so we can stay connected on Instagram. You can check out the podcast and you can check out the exclusive podcast offers that I'm doing for the remainder of the month. So I mentioned those in the episodes. If you're on my email list, I'll be keeping you up to date on opportunities to work together one-on-one, digital courses at an amazing price. So just beautiful offerings to celebrate the launch of Born for the Stars. All right, sending you all so much love and new moon blessings, and I will see you again very soon. Bye for now.